It begins with a contradiction so familiar that most people no longer notice it. The United States presents itself as the most dynamic, resilient economy in the world, yet its history is defined by repeated booms, followed by devastating crashes. Prosperity surges, confidence explodes, and then almost on schedule everything collapses. The mystery isn't whether these cycles will happen again, but why they keep happening despite decades of supposed lessons learned. Americans are often told that recessions are accidents caused by greed, bad luck, or unexpected shocks. But that explanation avoids a deeper question. If crashes are failures, why do they emerge from the same institutions, policies, and decision-makers every time? And if booms create wealth, why does that wealth consistently concentrate at the top before disappearing for everyone else? To understand this pattern, we have to rewind to the early foundations of the American economy, when the nation had no central bank and financial power was fragmented among private institutions. The 19th century was marked by violent economic swings, with panics in 1837, 1873, and 1893 wiping out savings and businesses, while financiers with inside access often survived intact. These early crises revealed a core vulnerability. America's economy grew faster than its ability to manage credit, speculation, and risk. Banks issued loans aggressively during good times and withdrew them suddenly during downturns. Each crash followed the same logic-y money-fueled expansion. Fear triggered contraction, and ordinary citizens paid the price. The Panic of 1907 exposed just how fragile the system had become. As banks failed and markets froze, the federal government lacked the tools to intervene. Instead, private financiers stepped in, coordinating rescues behind closed doors. This moment convinced political leaders that economic stability required centralized control, setting the stage for a dramatic shift in American finance. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was created to smooth out economic cycles and prevent future collapses. On paper, it promised balance and stability. In practice, it introduced a powerful new force, an institution capable of expanding or contracting money and credit for the entire economy. This was the first piece of the blueprint that would shape every boom and crash to come. The 1920s became the first real test. Low interest rates and expanding credit fueled massive speculation in stocks and real estate. Prosperity felt limitless, and policymakers largely celebrated the growth. But beneath the surface, leverage exploded, inequality widened, and the system grew dangerously dependent on continuous expansion. When the Federal Reserve tightened credit at the end of the decade, the boom collapsed almost instantly. The crash of 1929 wasn't just a market failure. It was the violent reversal of a system built on easy money and fragile confidence. The Great Depression revealed how quickly prosperity could evaporate when credit was withdrawn. In response, the U.S. government introduced sweeping reforms. Banks were regulated, deposits insured, and markets monitored more closely. These measures reduced some excesses, but they also further centralized economic power. The Federal Reserve emerged from the Depression with even greater authority over money, credit, and financial stability. World War II temporarily masked structural problems by flooding the economy with government spending. When the war ended, the United States stood unmatched economically. Through the Bretton Woods system, the dollar became the backbone of global finance, tying other currencies to U.S. monetary decisions and extending America's economic influence worldwide. This new role transformed domestic booms into global events. When the U.S. expanded its economy, capital flowed outward. When it tightened policy, the pressure rippled across borders. The blueprint had evolved. American growth cycles now reshaped the entire world economy. By the late 1960s, the strain became visible. Massive spending on social programs and war weakened confidence in the dollar's gold backing. In 1971, the U.S. severed the gold link entirely, turning the dollar into a fiat currency. This decision unlocked unprecedented flexibility and risk in monetary policy. Freed from physical limits, the Federal Reserve could now create money to counter downturns more aggressively. But this power came with consequences. Inflation surged during the 1970s, eroding wages and savings. The solution: sharp interest rate hike. Another painful recession and spread debt crises across developing nations. The 1980s marked a turning point. Deregulation, financial innovation, and globalization reshaped markets. Credit became easier to access, new instruments multiplied risk, and Wall Street gained extraordinary influence. Each boom grew larger, more complex, and more disconnected from underlying productivity. The 1990s tech boom followed the same pattern. Cheap capital fueled speculation, valuations soared, and confidence peaked. When the bubble burst, trillions vanished. Yet the response remained consistent. Interest rates were cut, liquidity was restored, and the cycle restarted almost immediately. In the early 2000s, this strategy inflated an even larger bubble. Low rates encouraged excessive borrowing, especially in housing. Financial institutions packaged risk into complex products, spreading it globally. When the system collapsed in 2008, it exposed how deeply the blueprint had embedded fragility into growth itself. The response to the crisis defined the modern era. The Federal Reserve injected trillions into markets, rescued major institutions, and stabilized the system. But the recovery revealed a pattern. Asset prices rebounded quickly, while wages lagged. Wealth concentrated faster than ever, setting the stage for the next imbalance. Instead of reforming the underlying structure, policymakers reinforced it. Banks became larger, markets more dependent on central bank support, and investors conditioned to expect intervention. Risk was no longer eliminated. It was socialized, shifted away from institutions and toward the public. Throughout the 2010s, economic expansion returned, but so did familiar warning signs. Corporate debt surged, inequality reached historic levels, and markets reacted less to economic fundamentals than to Federal Reserve signals. Growth looked strong, but it rested on increasingly fragile foundations. Then came the shock of 2020. The pandemic triggered the fastest collapse in modern history, followed by the fastest recovery. Massive monetary intervention prevented immediate disaster, but it also supercharged asset inflation. Once again, the blueprint revealed itself: crisis, intervention, boom. Inflation soon followed, squeezing households while asset owners remained protected. Rate hikes aimed at restoring balance threatened another slowdown. The cycle tightened, demonstrating how every solution contained the seeds of the next crisis. Globally, the effects were magnified. U.S. policy shifts altered capital flows, destabilized currencies, and strained governments worldwide. Nations with dollar-denominated debt faced rising costs, proving that America's internal cycles were now global forces. Repeated attempts at reform failed to address the core design. Transparency measures stalled. Financial power consolidated, and political incentives favored short-term stability over long-term resilience. The blueprint endured because it rewarded those closest to money and influence. Today, the pattern is unmistakable. Booms are fueled by credit expansion, crashes follow tightening, and recoveries rely on intervention. Each cycle leaves the economy more unequal, more leveraged, and more dependent on the same institutions. The first key takeaway is that America's booms and crashes are not accidents, but structural outcomes of how money and credit are managed. The second is that each crisis strengthens centralized power rather than weakening it. The third is that inequality is not a side effect, it is a feature of the cycle. The unresolved question is whether this blueprint can continue indefinitely. As debt growth confidence becomes more fragile and global alternatives emerge, the system faces pressures it has never encountered before. Understanding this cycle is no longer optional. If history is any guide, the next boom is already forming, and so is the next crash. The only uncertainty is who will be prepared when the pattern repeats and who will pay the price when it does.